Or I get into the top five, which still doesn't mean they're good movies, but at least they weren't horrible trash like some of the movies I already mentioned, in my opinion. Um, this is a hard one, but number five, I'm gonna go with The Brutalist. And The Brutalist was a movie I just saw yesterday, so it's kind of fresh in my mind. And the thing is about The Brutalist is that there actually is some good things about the movie that I enjoyed. But ultimately, the movie kind of went nowhere in the end, and I really did not care for the ending of it. It really kind of uh, really ruined the movie. Because I will say, like as we know, Brutalist is it's a 3.5 hour movie. It's the longest movie on this list, so it is a long movie, a hard movie to kind of get through because of the length of it. But I will say, like, for the first half of the movie, I thought it was actually pretty good, and I was really intrigued in the story. I liked the characters enough. I was like interested in what they were doing. And I mean, there was a story. It wasn't the most interesting story, I would say. That probably hurts. Like in that we have a 3.5 hour movie on a story that's really not that interesting enough to have a 3.5. If it's 3.5, I mean, it has to be like Lord of the Rings: Return of the King good to be 3.5. Or not very many movies can do. Or Ben Hur for me, I love Ben Hur, but it has to be something like that, which is to me very has a very interesting storyline and great characters and all that in a big story to make this doesn't seem like it garnered that length of a movie. And like I said, I thought like the beginning part, I like here's the whole story. It's like the Adrian Brody plays a Hungarian Jew who is going through the Holocaust or something and escapes and comes to America, and he's struggling as a immigrant, uh, poor immigrant coming to America and trying to make his way. Anyways, and he was a very talented architect in Hungary, and he gets noticed by a very wealthy man. He kind of comes across this wealthy man played by Guy Pearce, and this I'm forgetting his name, so I can't say it at the moment. But so this very wealthy man finds out that he's really good at architecture, and he says, "Hey, I want to build this community center for my mom who just died, and name it after her, and make this great thing about this town in Pennsylvania or whatever." Um, and so he sees that he's a good architect, so he hires him because he loves his architecture style, whatever, and so makes him the head designer of this community center and all that, and that's the whole story. So that's the story, and then he's got to try to build it, and he's got problems building it, and then there's also his wife comes back. Oh, finally, his wife, which is crazy, his wife didn't show up till like almost 2 hours into this 3.5 hour movie. And I was really surprised. I know I was like, "Where's now I'm forgetting her name, but um, gosh, I wish I should have had the paper in front of me about who's in it." But the actress who plays his wife, she finally comes over to America, and we don't see her at all until then. And I was surprised. I'm like, "Oh, I know he has a wife in this movie. That's a big part of the movie." I didn't realize it was like an hour 45 minutes into the movie before you even see her. So that was a little interesting. And then she becomes a huge part of the rest of the movie, and she's great. I think great performance by the actress. I'm forgetting her name, but um, yeah, so that was strange. But anyway, so that happens, and there's marital problems, and there's problems with the project. Anyways, and that's kind of the way the movie is. So to me, as a story, it's like it's not that interesting of a story. Just an immigrant who has to, design a building. I don't know. It has to be more stuff going on, and I don't think it had that quite for me. And like I said, but the scenes actually there were some interesting scenes. I think the acting is really good. Aiden Brody probably going to win another Oscar for her. Really good performance. Reminds me of his Pianist performance, which he won his Oscar for Best Actor, which was an amazing performance. I love his performance in Pianist. So, and that was in like 2002 or something like that. So I mean, you're talking, you know, 20 plus years later, and he could win another Oscar. Really great for him. I think he's a great actor, Aiden Brody. But yeah, good performance by him. Guy Pearce, great performance by him. And then the actress plays his wife. I'm forgetting right now. She was great. So it's like they all got nominated. I think very deserving, very good stuff. I think there's a lot of good. It's kind of interesting at first, him being an immigrant and seeing how he's going to make it in America. There's some interesting ideas there, I think, or some interesting scenes there. So I was actually intrigued, and even the whole scene where he meets, Guy Pearce, and then he invites him to his house for a dinner party, and I wasn't bored. Like my big fear of this was like, oh my gosh, this is so long. It's this Oscar bait movie. It's going to be super boring and slow moving. I really didn't feel like it was that slow moving or boring compared to Conclave or Emilia Perez or Nickel Boys. To me, even though this was much longer, it was more interesting and kept my interest a lot better. I would say it does drag the last about hour of the movie because you get through it and you're like, oh gosh, I still got an hour left in this movie. And it doesn't really go anywhere. It feels like at that point, I don't know, the movie it doesn't really go anywhere interesting and doesn't end anywhere interesting for the characters. And so it's like, I don't feel like we need another hour of this movie. So that does hurt the movie a bit, having an extra hour there. Uh, the thing I don't like about this movie that really ruins this movie is, I would say two things. One thing is the Adrian Brody character, Lazo Toloff. His character is very unlikable and not enjoyable. And I think to make a movie this long, you need to really love that main character. It needs to be a guy that you really admire, and I think in some sense, or that you really want to root for. And it was hard for me to root for this guy because he cheats on his wife. He's a heroin addict. He's kind of mean sometimes to other people, some of the people that he's working for or that he's, working with on this project. And it seems sometimes has a big ego about his ability to, as an architect. And so there's a lot of unlikable things. Even the way he treats his wife isn't that great either. It feels like he's not the most loving husband. And it doesn't seem to me, like I said. I don't know. So there's a lot of things not to like about this guy. And so after you get through 3.5 hours of this guy on screen, you're just like, I don't really like this guy. They're not really rooting for him that hard to be successful. And it makes it less interesting movie, I think, or an enjoyable movie for me. Also, there's a moment, again, I won't say anything big, spoilers, but there's a moment at the end of the movie, towards the end of the movie, that Guy Pearce's character, and it's weird because Guy Pearce's character is very nice throughout the movie. He's a very nice guy, and he's, very nice, I think, to Laszlo for most part. He does a couple things that are jerky, but for most part, he's kind of, he gives him a job. He, lets him to his home. He treats him pretty good for most of the movie. And then towards the end, he does this one thing to him, and it comes out of nowhere. I don't get it. I don't understand why he did what he did. But let's say he does something bad to Laszlo, and it's mind-boggling to me. It's like, what's going on? Why is he doing this? It comes out of nowhere, like I said, and it just really ruins the whole movie. You're like, I didn't need that in the movie. Don't know why they decided that was a way to go. It was very weird choice, in my opinion. And so that moment happens, and then that kind of goes throughout the whole movie. Like, okay, where do we go from here? So I don't know. It's just, there's weird stuff like that. And then there's a weird scene between him and his wife. I won't talk about in detail, but I didn't care for that scene either. The scene towards the end with him and his wife, who is paraplegic because of whatever you call it, because of her time, like in dealing with the Holocaust, whatever, in Hungary or whatever she was going through. She can't walk anymore, and so there's a weird scene between them at the end. Like there's a sex scene that's very weird and not needed. And anyways, so a lot of those scenes I didn't care for. And then there's a scene at the end, again, another scene between the wife and Guy Pearce that comes out of nowhere to me. And what happens to that character doesn't make much sense to me either. I'm like, okay. And then they kind of end the movie like in the future, basically, when Laszlo's an old man. Anyway, so I don't know. It just wasn't a very great ending, very satisfactory. Again, the last hour just wasn't that great for me. Unlikable characters. Overall, that's why I'm putting it at number 5. It's still a movie I can't recommend. I would probably give it 2 stars overall because it was just, again, just the last part of the movie just was, I didn't like at all, and just kind of ruined the whole movie. And it wasn't that interesting movie to begin with necessarily, but there's good things, like I said, the acting and some of the, some of the scenes were good towards the beginning, and the characters at first were interesting. Anyways, but so it's like, it's not the worst movie, but still there's some choices made that really did not like, and made me put this, it's still in top 5 because definitely more interesting some of the movies in the bottom part. But yeah, so that's The Brutalist, which is definitely one of the front runners for like a lot of big Oscars anyway. So, all right, number 4, we're gonna go with Anora. And if you know me about Nora, Nora did was in my top 10 worst movies of the year. And again, this is a movie that I think is not boring. That's why I have it this high at number 4. I hated the choices that the characters make, and I hated the main character, and that's why I really did not like the movie. But I will say the movie was not boring. It flowed. It actually was paced pretty well. And that's why it's at number 4. To me, the worst thing you can be is boring and slow moving. If you're and a lot of the movies were over 2 hours long, so it's like, man, if I have to sit there for 2 hours and 20 minutes, and you're slow moving and boring, I mean that's just torture to me. At least Nora was stupid. I think I didn't like the whole storyline of the movie. Didn't like the character, but it was actually, like I said, not boring. It flowed pretty well. There was some humorous moments. I think it's kind of almost talked about as a comedy, I guess, in some senses, which I kind of get. There's some comedic moments here and there. I didn't laugh a lot, but there were some funny moments. But overall, I hated that main character, Nora, played by Mikey Madison. She was an annoying character who yelled and screamed a lot and was always angry. And she treated the one guy that I thought was actually probably the best character in the movie, who also got nominated, Borislav, I think his name was, or something like that. Maybe that's a real actor's name. I forget what the character's name is, but he's actually really nice to her, and she treats him like crap throughout the whole movie. Even at the very end, he's really nice to her, and she still treats him like crap. So to me, it was just a really mean character, Nora. And in the end, nothing really happens. Like the whole idea of the movie is that she's a stripper slash prostitute who's also Russian, or has a Russian background, and she meets this really rich Russian guy who's this, he's young, he's like 21 or something like that, and his parents are super rich from Russia, and he's in America, and all he does is play video games, has sex with, or goes to stripper clubs, has sex with prostitutes, and parties, and does a bunch of drugs, and that's all the guy does. And he basically asked her to marry him, just I think so he can stay in America. He doesn't have to go back to Russia or something. And then the family, of course, wants him to get annulled, because they're like, we don't want you marrying a prostitute, which I'm totally with them. I wouldn't want my son, if I had a son, to be married to a prostitute either. Anyway, so that's the whole story. So, but the second half of the story is just them trying to find the guy. So it's not much of a story. To me, it's a very weak story, when like half of the movie is just, we don't know where this guy is. We're going to drive around town trying to find this guy and go to every stripper joint and restaurant and see if anybody's ever seen him. Anyways, and that's the movie. And to me, it's not a really strong subject matter for a Best Picture type movie. And yet it probably will win Best Picture, which is crazy. And like I said, the performances weren't terrible by any means. I just really did not like that main character, like I said. And it was just a strange storyline for a movie, Best Picture type. And the choices at the end, I hated so much. There's something happens at the very end again. Nora does this thing at the end. I'm like, I don't get why she did that. I don't get what it means. And the movie just ends really abruptly, where like, okay, like I didn't feel any satisfactory at the ending, where I'm like, okay, where's this story going? What's going to happen after the movie's over with these characters? I have no idea. It's just bizarre. Anyway, so that's why I have Nora here at number 4, but I have it higher than most because it wasn't boring. So I give it that.